Welcome to On Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Gerry Hamilton and CJ Vogel. This is the Saturday morning conversation. Gerry and CJ, thank you all for joining us. This episode brought to you by our friends over at Advanced Pain Care, Dr. Mark Malone and his staff there across Central Texas. All right, CJ and Gerry, big recruiting weekend for the Longhorns. A lot of guys came in on Friday. We've already seen every single player that was supposed to come in on Friday from out of state arrived Friday as scheduled. A couple of flights were delayed originally. Kendall Gerville and James Johnson originally delayed, but they got into town. Everything's good there. Gerry, you were out at the airport stationed there almost all afternoon long yesterday. What are your thoughts on these guys that came in from out of town? Let's start with the out of state guys, I guess.
Yeah, CJ and I were both at the airport, and look, I think when Trenton Henderson came down the escalator, the crazy thing is his father was the biggest one of the family, CJ. I mean, I was like, wow. I was like, I thought I didn't talk to his dad when I was at the Pensacola Catholic Spring Jamboree. Somebody pointed him out to me, but I was a long ways away from there. But his dad looks like he could play. And then Trenton was there. Obviously, mom was there. And little brother, who's a 2028 edge prospect who has LSU, Auburn, and Florida State offers already. So, boy, that was one impressive-looking family, CJ. I mean, it was hard to beat that. But if anything beat it, CJ, it was the skinny ankles and high calves of Tyler Atkinson.
Yeah, that was my first time seeing him in person, Gerry. I know you've seen him a couple times. Look, he is how you draw him up out of the lab, basically. That's an impressive-looking prospect. And to see both of them come down almost consecutively in the span of about 20, 30 minutes, I'm just imagining what a front seven might look like with both. And I know there's a long way to go, but that's the level of guys Texas is recruiting right now. And on the hoof, I mean, my goodness, they're impressive-looking prospects.
Bobby, those guys, and I've seen them both. No-brainer five-star prospects for me on defense. They just are.
Yeah, so that's Trenton Henderson and Tyler Atkinson. Kendall Gerville, James Johnson also in town. Caden Prothrow and Kiwi Brown, the two tight ends that have come in, are also in town as well. Richard Wesley, the big defensive end that was originally committed to Oregon, he showed up as well, Gerry.
Yeah, he did, and he was a reclass, obviously, from 27 to 26, 6'4.5", 6'5", about 245 pounds. A guy that Texas really likes. Now, he's scheduled to be at Ohio State for the Texas game officially, and then Oregon, Texas, and USC are in it as well. James Johnson, we get to do a little special here for On Texas Football. Friday was James Johnson's birthday, so happy birthday to James Johnson. That one, man, there's been a lot of people that were thinking Miami would win out there, and maybe they still will. But one source told me Georgia and Texas are the top two headed in this weekend with Kendall Gerville, Georgia, Texas, Florida. And James Johnson, you see there on our great graphic producer Matt made. He is originally from North Fort Myers High School. Him and Gerville are really good friends. They both know Myron Charles as well. James Johnson moved down to Miami Northwestern this spring. But this group of out-of-state guys, I mean, Caden Prothrow is a CJ great-looking cat now. I mean, 6'5", 235, looks like a rebounder in basketball, that sleek basketball build that you can just see how his frame's going to kind of grow out over time. Kiwi Brown has gained about 20 pounds since the start of the year, a former wide receiver. He can add a lot to his frame. It's pretty rare when a dad's like bigger and stronger than a kid, but that was the case with like two guys. Travis Brown's a former UFC fighter.
Yeah, Prothrow specifically looks like he's a guy that can add 20, 25 pounds at least, right? He's kind of in that 230 range. I mean, I don't know how big you want him to get, but that frame looks like it has a pretty long ways to go to fill out, kind of on that Jordan Washington route, basketball all the way through, and then you get to college, and he got up to about 265. I don't know if that's how big you want him necessarily, but point being, impressive prospects from the out-of-state once again coming into Austin for another and final official visit weekend.
Yeah, I looked at the out-of-state guys, and I think that look, Longhorns bringing guys in this weekend that are just, they're elite players, bottom line. And I think maybe the one that we didn't mention out of all of them is this one, Diabell. who just won the Elite 11 this week, national ranking 13 overall, 3 as a quarterback. That might be changing after his performance this week, guys.
Yeah, we didn't see Diabell at the airport Friday because he flew in Thursday night after the conclusion of the Elite 11 competition. Probably wanted to be the first one in the building for the official visit weekend. Him and his dad, Rajah Bell, flew in Thursday night, so we did not see him at the airport Friday. But congrats again to Diabell. What a great accomplishment for him. Look, Arch Manning didn't take part in Elite 11. He obviously he's part of the Manning Passing Academy. That makes Diabell the first Texas quarterback signing under Sark to win the Elite 11. I think the first Texas quarterback, period, to win Elite 11 MVP.
Yeah, you're right about that. And there's Gerry, I know we've talked about recruiting kind of becoming more transactional in the sense that, NIL plays a big factor. I do think it'll help a little bit having a Diabell on campus this weekend and just kind of knowing that the future of Texas football is in good hands. And of course, he's a guy that folks like to be around. I've seen it at the Elite 11 in the Austin area. We've been around him on a number of 7-on-7 occasions, visit weekends. Folks kind of flock to him on the recruiting trail. We'll see if that plays any impact at all with a number of these big unofficial or big out-of-state guys coming in this weekend.
All right.
And Bobby, I think I was going to say, I think it'll help with younger kids in South Florida if Texas recruits those guys, because he is the Gatorade Player of the Year. He has NIL deals in high school in Florida, and now he's an Elite 11 MVP. He is going to get more press next year as a Texas commitment than any other prospect in the state of Florida.
All right, let's say thanks real quick to our sponsor before we talk about the in-state guys that are on campus today.
Pros know the pain stops here.
Physical therapy helps me as an athlete then and now. And do I still need therapy? Yes. Advanced Pain Care helps with that.
Injuries will stack up. They'll add up. You can't let those injuries get you down, and Advanced Pain Care has been very helpful for me.
We can help with whatever's got you down, from nerve damage to our spinal cord stimulator. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Same-day appointments available.
Advanced Pain Care. The pain stops here.
All right, thank you to Dr. Mark Malone, his group at Advanced Pain Care, offices across Central Texas. Gerry and CJ, in-state guys, we've mentioned a bunch of them and talked about them, but maybe no more important one than this one. John Turney, the big offensive lineman out of North Crowley coming in, defending state champ, Texas A&M, Michigan. Those the finalists, it looks like. Gerry, what are your thoughts on his recruitment? A lot of noise out there right now that Texas A&M making a big push.
Well, there's two different things being said with his recruitment. One source claims it's going to come down to Texas and Michigan. The other source, another person, thinks it'll come down to Texas and Texas A&M. And it's going to be interesting to see which one of those ends up being correct at the end of the day, because there was so much momentum for Texas A&M coming off that official visit weekend, the weekend that A&M had, and how they've dominoed since then. But again, at Texas this weekend, the school he's been to most throughout this process, and obviously has a couple of siblings that are in Austin going to college, one at Houston Tillotson, I believe one at Texas. So there's a lot of reasons to be in Austin. His father played defensive line for Gary Patterson at TCU back in the day, was a tremendous two-time all-conference player. But it's going to be really interesting with turn time. Does this actually come down to Texas and Texas A&M, or does it come down to Texas and Michigan? Because we're hearing a little bit of both right now.
Well, it's good to be the one in the middle. Hey, CJ, linebacker, I want to go to you next and ask you about Kosak Paula, because he's a young man we haven't talked about much since he took that unofficial visit back in April. Yet a lot of people think that he's a linebacker to be dealt with at this point, and somebody the Longhorns have pretty good chance of landing.
Yeah, there's kind of a polar bear in Austin, Texas on this recruiting graphic, if that makes sense. It's Penn State, right? You got 3 regional schools, and you got one way up in the Northeast with Penn State. So it's pretty interesting because earlier in the cycle, Kosak Paula visited for one of the first spring practices, and then the very next weekend, he was on campus once again. So back-to-back visits in the spring, it felt like things were maybe going to happen very quickly for the Longhorns here, yet he's carried out his progress in process pretty long into this cycle. It's going to be interesting. I do think Houston has a case. I think Baylor has a case as well. But when it comes down to it, how do you say no to two teams that were in the college football playoff? That's Texas and that's Penn State. Is he given the green light from either one over the next couple of weeks? That's going to be really interesting, but that's certainly one to keep an eye on, especially with the way that linebacking board has continued to grow over the last few months.
Yeah, also coming in at linebacker, Calvin Thomas, Jerry, a guy that you've talked about before, young man out of Cy Ranch, 6'3", 210 pounds. He is a guy that Texas likes a lot, has flown a little bit under the radar for a Texas recruit, though.
Yeah, he has. And, look, Texas set up that official visit a little later on him. And so the initial reaction was, oh, Texas is missing on guys. But I think Texas really went back and gave him a May evaluation as well, Johnny Nansen and defensive staff members. And look, you see there, he's coming down. They visited Nebraska last weekend, North Carolina, Michigan, Nebraska, SMU, and Texas. And to answer a question that people have had on Texas football, does Texas just want one of Oak Paula or Calvin Thomas? I'm not sure that's the case. Texas needs 3 or 4 linebackers in this class. 4 is on the table, but 3 for sure. And right now there's 0. So, and Tyler Atkinson's in. You don't know what's going to happen with Xavier Griffin, I should say. Braden Rouse was in last weekend, is considered a Tennessee lean over Texas, headed into the Tennessee OV this weekend. So I think there's a scenario where Texas tries to get both Paula and Calvin Thomas.
Real quick, I know that we've gone over those names, Jerry, throughout the official visit months. You got a floor right now of linebacker targets all in around the top 275, 300 players in the entire country. And that's just that one position. That's a pretty darn good net in terms of guys you're targeting at one spot in which you're hoping to take a pretty large class this year.
Hey, let's talk about positions. Texas bringing in also, other than turn time, they're bringing in Max Wright and Nicholas Robertson. They are on campus. They are also already committed. Then there's some receivers. Let's move to that position because Texas already has 2 receivers on campus that are committed right now. Jermaine Bishop out of Willis, Texas, and Chris Stewart out of Shadow Creek down in the Pearland area. And then there's a legacy of sports. Jerry, tell us a little bit about Kaden Finley and where his commitment sits right now, or where his recruitment sits right now.
Well, those are the 3 visits he took. For those on podcasts that can't see it, it's Notre Dame, Texas, Texas A&M. This is going to come down to Notre Dame and Texas, barring the unforeseen. I can't see Jermichael Finley signing his signature anywhere around the A&M letter of intent, but that's another subject. So Notre Dame and Texas. Notre Dame was the perceived lean early in this recruitment because there was a thought that Kaden Finley might want to blaze his own path, go do his own thing. Not all kids want to be a legacy recruit where their father was a tremendous football player, and that's what Jermichael was at Texas. I do think as this recruitment's getting closer to July 4th finality, that they staying closer to home matters. I think he had a great unofficial visit in April with his whole family, with Chris Jackson, with Steve Sarkisian, and the offensive staff. I think Texas and Notre Dame are in a battle. I think there's confidence on the Texas side going into this visit, but I don't think Notre Dame thinks it's a lost cause either. So this is one of those recruitments that we may feel like Texas has done really well with, but Notre Dame certainly has not thrown in the towel.
CJ, you look at these other 2 guys. Let's talk about Chris Stewart, young man out of Shadow Creek, visited Tennessee last weekend. Sometimes guys that commit really early get lost in the wash. They don't get the PR or the publicity that maybe others do. Chris Stewart kind of fighting through that, but Texas clearly wants the young man from Shadow Creek. What do you think about him, as well as Jermaine Bishop? I'll put Bishop's page up next here.
Yeah, I'll start with Chris Stewart. That recruitment to me feels an awfully lot to Amari Winston from a year ago. A guy that commits very early, one of the first in the class, and you just kind of feel and hear about maybe some larger name targets at the position. You wonder whether or not when that class and if that class fills up, where he might stand in that class. But look, Texas likes Chris Stewart. I know that he was at Tennessee. We heard very early in the week from a family member that visit went well, but hey, he's 100% locked in. to the Longhorns. And I think, Gerry, that we've also heard behind the scenes that Texas likes him as well and hopes to keep him in the class. So for Chris Stewart and Texas right now, that marriage is happy. The honeymoon phase has lingered into about month 8, 9, 10, however long he's been it's been since he's made his decision. But then you pair him up with a Jermaine Bishop, a guy who, look, I thought he would be a phenomenal cornerback prospect, but you see him with the ball in his hands and you see the production and what he was able to do at Willis, and hey, it makes sense to give him a shot at the wide receiver spot. So I'm all for it. Again, you got 2 really talented guys from the in-state looking to add a third this weekend. And on top of, Diabell, it certainly helps having 2 other guys at the playmaking position on campus to say, hey, come be a part of this class that we're building, hopefully going back-to-back number 1 spots.
Hey,
Gerry,
I got a question for the 2 of you guys. Who thinks if we bring that, can we bring that Jermaine Bishop back up real quick? Who thinks he scored on that play? I do. I bet he scored on that play.
He can put the ball in the end zone. He's got some speed. Hey, a couple of the guys in state that we haven't mentioned that are on campus right now. Paris Melvin, the defensive back out of the Cypress area, as well as Chase Calakut, another Houston area product out of North Shore. Gerry, your thoughts on those 2? I know you've seen them both multiple times.
Yeah, so Chase Calakut's a very intriguing guy because he's a safety. Safety first is what he wants to play. But you talk to those around North Shore, there you see that frame. Okay, this is 6'4", 190-ish, 195. And I've said he has a frame, and I'm not comparing him as a player. He has a frame similar to DeMarvion Overshown coming out of high school. And you talk to those at the North Shore program who have been there almost 2 decades, they think he's going to be a close-to-the-ball player that may grow into an outside linebacker long-term. And when you see that frame, and you see where they're going with that thought, and that he is really good close to the line of scrimmage as a player. So Georgia, Michigan, Texas, that's your final 3. And I could see this being a guy that, wherever he commits, it's going to say safety. But in 2 or 3 years, I think is going to be the determining factor on where he plays. Paris Melvin had a tremendous junior year, playing more on offense than defense. He's being recruited as a defensive back by Texas. There you see he's not a wiry DB. He's a guy who carries it a lot, rushed for over 1,000 yards. He is a guy who's got a strong body for a high school. He's probably closer to 180 now for a high school athlete that plays all over the place. But Texas is recruiting him as a defensive back. And there you see the schools that he's made official visits to. Texas bumped A&M, who was supposed to have him in this weekend, but he was at Texas last week unofficially and immediately scheduled the Texas OV and bumped A&M, which is a pretty good sign for Texas. The question becomes there, how many DBs will Texas take in this class? They have 2 guys. I think they lead for Samari Matthews, who's at South Carolina this weekend, but that doesn't mean it's over. And then it comes down to Paris Melvin and Devon Benjamin, because Devon Benjamin is arguably been a slight Oregon lean over Texas in recent weeks. So we'll see where those go. But I think Paris Melvin, Chase Calakut, you see a little more Houston flavor in this class than some past classes, Bobby. And that's something we'll talk about in future months.
Yeah, Jermaine Bishop, Chris Stewart as well, Nick Robertson. I agree with you. Let's talk about this real quick. Later today, Vodney Cleveland, defensive lineman, announces his decision between Texas, Florida, and North Carolina. We have been wrong. Look, in this day and age, NIL can rule the day. And so where you think some guy may be leaning one day, it may be somewhere else the next. But given that Vodney Cleveland canceled his official visit to Miami for this weekend, it feels like Texas really hit I don't want to say hit a home run, but they really connected with Vodney Cleveland. Longhorns going up against Florida and North Carolina. Gerry, your thoughts on that recruitment, or CJ?
Yeah, I think he had a great unofficial visit in April, and I think he had a tremendous official visit on June 13th, canceling Miami the week after his Texas OV, shutting it down. Texas, as you said, Florida, North Carolina. Georgia wants him, but that would be the surprise for me. But I like where Texas sits going into his announcement. And, Texas has a little bit of momentum working here on the defensive line right now. And it's going to be interesting to see how these numbers play out and who all jumps on board.
Yeah, I agree.
You agree, CJ? CJ and Gerry, y'all were both at the airport yesterday. You mentioned Trenton Henderson looked impressive. Trenton Henderson's dad looked impressive. Was there anybody that just made you go, whoa, like Nick Brooks a year ago?
Well, for me, it was Tyler Atkinson. Again, it was first time seeing him in person. Texas, we talked about it when Johnny Nansen was first hired, the longer levered guys, guys with extreme wingspans and builds. Tyler Atkinson in person, I think, certainly has that. And when you kind of compare the builds of a Tyler Atkinson and Xavier Griffin from what we saw June 13th, I mean, that's the level of guys Texas is now recruiting on the front seven. It's exciting. So I know that you're going to expect to see Xavier Griffin more off the edge at the next level than a Tyler Atkinson, but it's guys who are basically scratching their kneecaps with their arms standing straight up. And that hasn't always been the case with guys that I've seen Texas recruit at the linebacker front seven spots.
I don't know if we can bring that graphic back up, but Colorado State wishes they had linebackers that look like that. If you
Hey, I was going to say this real quick. Kendall Gerville and James Johnson we didn't catch them at the airport yesterday, but they are, in fact, in town. All right, that's going to do it. We'll be on the lookout for Vodney Cleveland. We'll have more for you today on Texas Football. I want to say thanks again to our sponsor, the guys over at Advanced Pain Care. Same day and next day appointments available. Just give them a shout over at Advanced Pain Care. For Gerry Hamilton and CJ Vogel, I'm Bobby Burton. You guys have a good weekend. Hook 'em.